Now, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the service today that we have some beautiful flowers right here behind me. And these came from the garden of our neighbor here on Court Street, Lori and Bill Shutt. So we want to thank Lori for sharing her flowers with us. They're so gorgeous, and we appreciate that. And I also love them because I always see flowers as a symbol of hope and new life. And that's what I want to talk about today is hope. It's, well, it's easy to talk about hope when everything seems to be going according to our plans, going well. It's kind of like being happy about sunshine during the summertime or enjoying having a full head of hair when you're still a teenager. I remember those days. But talking about hope when there's a pandemic going on and when we've witnessed the reality of racial injustice and we're grieving and searching for answers, when there have been huge demonstrations and even violence over racial injustice, and when there's so much social division and political polarization, maybe talking about hope can sound like so much wishful thinking. It can even sound foolish. But on the other hand, isn't this when we ought to be talking about hope? Isn't it precisely during a time like this when we can feel lacking in hope when we need it the most? It makes sense that we can take in all the big issues that dominate our attention, and it can feel overwhelming and draining and demoralizing. Whenever I find myself feeling that way, I know that it's time for a reality check. It can be challenging to know what reality even is sometimes, but pulling back and gaining a different and higher perspective always helps me. A reality check and seeing things from a bigger perspective helps me focus not so much on myself and my fears and my sense of not knowing how to best respond to everything that's going on, but what I can do for others. So today, I'd like for us to be reminded of where hope comes from, where it really lives, and in the huge scale of everything that feels beyond our control, to be reminded that there are some things we can control. Because one of those things is to reawaken hope, be in touch with hope, and live in hope. Sound good? During the first century, the Apostle Paul wrote letters to communities of Christians, and many of these churches were doing just fine, but many were not. His letters to some of those churches are what we find now in the New Testament, because no one apparently bothered to save the letters written to churches that were doing great, that had no problems or no internal struggles or no persecution from their neighbors. Glad to hear you're doing swell. Keep up the good work. We don't have any letters like that. But for those places where things were not going so smoothly, over the years, people hung on to and copied and recopied and shared Paul's letters. And the church in Rome was apparently one of those. In the brief piece of that letter we heard today that Mark read, one word keeps popping up over and over again: hope. So we can safely assume then that an issue the Romans had was that they were suffering from a lack of hope. Now, we don't know the specifics, but Paul does talk about their suffering. Chances are it was a combination of things: internal struggles over how to understand the nature of their new faith. In those days, people were still trying to figure out how to distinguish between Judaism and Christianity, or even if they should. And then external pressure, not knowing how to fit in and function in the larger society, and they were being persecuted by their neighbors who had vastly different beliefs. All we know for sure is, whatever they were going through, they needed to hear a word of hope. And their hope, Paul told them, could be found in sharing the glory of God. So we have to ask, what does he mean by that, the glory of God? Some people think Paul was referring to what happens after we die. But I don't think Paul was talking about the future as much as their present moment. Because after all, hope's not something you buy and you save away for a rainy day. It's something that you need right now. And as dark as things might appear, that's when the hope you need shows up. I heard a talk that was given several years ago by a woman from Australia. Her name is Peta Murchison. And it was one of those moments when I had a reality check about hope and where to find it and how to share it. Peta started her talk out by saying, I am a mother of two children, Toby is 4, and he loves playing with Legos and drawing. Mia is 6. She likes warm baths, horse riding, and hugs. Then Peta paused for a few moments and she said, "When my daughter dies, I will wash her and dress her. I will put flowers in her hair. We will play music, light candles, and hold her. And our family and friends will come to say their goodbyes." It was shocking. Here stood this young mother telling an audience that she had a daughter with an incurable condition. And the topic of Peta's talk that day, of all things, was hope. And my first thought was, whoa, if that's her reality, and she's talking about hope, then anything I'm going through, any anxiety or fear or lack of hope, is pretty lame by comparison. So Peta went on to tell her story. She said that she had been forced to think about hope, and now she had the ability to see hope even in a situation that felt hopeless. She said that living in grief meant that life had become more illuminated. It made her realize the goodness in all people and appreciate all the good that was in her life, like flowers from a neighbor or hugs from complete strangers. Simple things that were unexpected and powerful. Peta told about how before Mia's diagnosis, she had been a normal, healthy, energetic toddler, scooting around, singing songs, learning to count. But at age 3, her behavior changed. Aggressive outbursts, lashing out at her little brother, pulling things off the walls. At first, Peta and her husband, Hamish, just thought they were really bad at parenting, and they vowed to be more consistent with boundaries and bedtimes. And then, out of the blue, Mia had a seizure. Doctors at first diagnosed her with epilepsy, but the seizures got worse over the next few months. Mia started falling down and hitting her head so much they had to find a helmet for her to wear. And then suddenly Mia was struggling to walk and talk, and her eyesight was degenerating. They went through a whole team of specialists to figure out what was wrong, but the doctors were just as confused as Peta and Hamish. Peta said there's nothing that can prepare you for being told your child has no future. But that's what happened after more neurological tests. Turns out, Mia had a rare genetic condition that affects less than 1 out of 100,000 children. It is called infantile Batten disease. It's fatal. The doctor said they were talking about years, not decades. And within a couple years, Mia's condition would deteriorate to the point where she would be completely blind and unable to speak, and requiring their total care. It was way too late for any enzyme or gene therapy. So, Peta and Hamish shifted their efforts from fighting for Mia's life to giving her the best life for the time she had left. Their friends and family rallied around them and supported them. They held a fundraiser for Mia. Peta said the generosity and kindness of others was pivotal in their ability to cope. With their friends' help, they set up a social media campaign. It would change Mia's condition, but it raised awareness about Batten's disease and other childhood genetic disorders that are life-limiting conditions. And it raised a lot of money for research. Peta said their family faced one new reality check after another of how hard it is to navigate the healthcare system in any country when your child has a condition like Mia's. They had no expertise in healthcare or rare diseases, and they experienced a sense of chaos in all the challenges of learning to care for Mia, and in navigating their grief, and in advocating for how she'd be even able to go to school. The endless appointments and the piles of paperwork. And just in trying to ensure Mia had the best life possible in the time she had left. In the midst of all that, Peta said she experienced something she knew was always there but had never fully appreciated. The most tender and giving elements of the human spirit. An outpouring of acceptance at school from the other kids who didn't have to be told but just naturally acted in ways that were gracious and loving, like holding Mia's hand and propping her head back into place into the headrest of her wheelchair, reading to her, They stuffed letters and drawings into her backpack that they would discover later. Notes that said, "I love you, and you are better than rainbows, and we are best friends," and invitations to birthday parties and playdates. Peta said it was important for her to bear witness to all of this, and that pointing out the beauty of humanity every day is a privilege to her, and to affirm that the incredible kindness she saw gave her a new perspective to be able to recognize and appreciate all the small but consequential human elements of connection. Peta said that she's been kissed on the cheek by strangers in a doctor's waiting room. She's listened and seen the faces of exhaustion and fear in pediatric wards. She's cried with moms who she's just met, whose children are also sick. And in her community, in person and online, she's experienced deeper connections of love than she would have known otherwise because of a mutual need she had with others to do something while feeling so powerless to do anything. Mia, she said, loves the feel of water and setting atop a horse, and she couldn't get enough of her parents' hugs. And Peta said that in all of this, she realized that the present moment was the only place where they wanted to be. So Peta was forced to live there in the present and let go of tomorrow and next week and the next month. She embraced mindfulness and gratitude, unable to overlook, as most of us tend to do, that we're all living on borrowed time. She said Mia taught her more than anyone in life how to be more patient, not to worry about the chaos and having everything perfect before you leap in and do things. And she taught her that it's okay to be broken sometimes. And that allowed her to focus on what really matters right now, to see that life is more vivid and more beautiful and more profound and more meaningful than we so often stop to appreciate. And she said, of course, she understood how unspeakably sad life could be in accepting that there was no cure for her daughter, and that one day she would no longer have her daughter's own body to snuggle up with at night. Peta closed her talk by saying, "When I put flowers in her hair and friends and family come to say goodbye, I'll remember the human capacity for hope is so strong that even when you're told there is no hope, somehow you still manage to find it." 3 years after Peta gave that speech, Mia died in 2018 at the age of 9. But the hope that Peta and her family discovered in what anyone else would say was a hopeless situation, that hope never died. And that's the essence of hope. And I need that reality check, that perspective, that even in moments that seem to be absent of hope, it cannot die. Because humans have an innate capacity for kindness and goodness, and self-sacrifice and empathy. It's how we're created. Now, it's true, we can be self-serving and jealous and petty. We can seek sometimes to divide for our own gain rather than be a force for unity and healing. We can be blind to our prejudices and how we're complicit in social systems that perpetuate injustice. Instead of saying and doing healing and hope-filled things that will bring us together, we can so often say and do dumb and hurtful things that separate us from each other. And if you ever see that happening, know that that's usually an expression of fear. But in the much bigger tapestry of human connection, what weaves us together is never fear, but hope. And we have proof that hope is real. We have the faith that the God who loves us invests our lives with the hope that's far stronger and more enduring than anything we're going through. We can wake up to the hope that's all around us in this present moment and appreciate that hope and bear witness to that hope and share that hope and live in that hope and act on that hope so that it is made real for every human. So hope, God's own hope lived out through you and me, is what we need and what the world needs now more than ever.